we were approached by people in the Syrian community in Leeds. And what they were saying, they identified as two major issues they were struggling. One of which was getting into work. I mean, this guy Farouz actually is a qualified dentist, but his qualifications weren't accepted in this country for 5 years. It took him to get into a proper work. The other one, because of all the cuts, was people wanting to learn English. So using this approach, what we managed to do is find this fairly crappy community centre in Leeds. And they took it over 1 day a week, and they decided what they do was set up a sort of pay-as-you-feel cafe, initially for that community, Syrian community, very quickly for wider groups, and then it became the community cafe of choice in that area, and this really vibrant cafe. The other thing that happened was, in terms of English, this is where you make the leap to strength-based social care. Oh, sorry. I do tend to wonder. Is that same organisation, they were working with an older person, and I think, again, a few years ago, she'd have been heading towards a day centre. But it turned out she was a retired school teacher. So they said, oh, would you be interested in teaching English to this group of Syrians? And at first she was a bit reluctant. She was encouraged, no. So what happened is, when the kitchen finishes, she goes and she does formal English lessons, and that went down really well. But then the Syrian community went, oh no, this is too much. We want to give something back. So they set up something called White Helmets in homage to what's going on in Syria. And what they do is they go around the local community and they do basic repairs, painting and stuff like that for older people, disabled people, in return for conversational English. That's the deal. And you have to agree to have a chat and a cup of tea with them. The group then applied to be the local luncheon club, and they were successful in that application. So now if you're an older person living in Cross Green in area of Leeds and you use a luncheon club, you either go to the Syrian kitchen or it's delivered to you by a group of Syrian people who also offer to do other stuff as well. You cannot buy that sort of community cohesion, and that's where we begin to see differences across the whole system. I'm also interested in ABCD just as an approach. I worry that some people only go this far. I strongly recommend you do the other stuff as well. But a bit like strength-based social care, once it's in your head, you start to think, what can that mean for other services and organisations? So, for example, we wrote into our home care specification a requirement that home care staff have local knowledge about what's going on. And I know they're dashing in there and they're really busy getting people dressed and going to the toilet and everything else. But just think the fantastic potential of them to help people connect to communities. You know, in Leeds, home care is 20,000 visits a week. That's a huge resource to use. And we're currently recommissioning care homes, and we've written into that a requirement that the care home itself starts to work to be a community asset. We don't quite know what that might be yet. It's for them to work with that community to do it. So finally, just a couple of things really. We want to go further, because much as I'm a huge champion for this, it's still only bits of Leeds. So we're doing those 4 or 5 neighbourhoods. We're going to continue resourcing that. We're actually using the Improved Better Care Fund to do that at the moment, but I've got a commitment to pick that up and expand it. We are writing into service specifications of all services, starting to move that approach. So we're currently recommissioning all our community mental health services. We are going to support them to take more of an ABCD approach, while still doing other stuff as well. It's really important to work across the council. It's interesting in Leeds because this came through social care. As I was saying, in Bristol, it actually came through their communities on the ABCD, and they're trying to influence social care. The real potential for us as a local authority, though, is huge in this area. I would also argue that it's a massive way of getting the rest of the local authority to support social care. So if you think of the potential of sports in terms of health and wellbeing, libraries you already know about, the culture sector, housing, working together to much more of a community focus. And of course linking into the huge stuff that's going on in the NHS. And that can be a bit 2 steps forward, 1 step back sometimes, but I think particularly the potential around health coaching, the increasing importance of primary care, and that's where I've had some of the big connections, the further integration work that's going on through local care partnerships. And of course, as your focus is today, this has to go hand in hand with strength-based social care. Leeds was slightly on because we started the ABCD journey before the strength-based social care, but then Kath came and very quickly closed that circle. And my simple view of that is there's not a lot of use doing strength-based social care work and encouraging people to think of their community resource if there isn't one. So this really starts to think about it. But it also helps that narrative about shifting from that power relationship between social work and clients to one that is much more about working together, because you're working with people who are citizens. What we intend to do is develop further training. So because I want organisations to do this, they need further training. So we've just put out a spec for a training organisation. And then I also recognise this can't stay in the realm of the local authority pushing this. So we're going to be commissioning a third sector organisation to in effect act as a community organiser across the whole city, really to drive that agenda. And then last 2 slides. As I've said already, this is a move from service land, it's not a move away from responsibilities. That's a really important thing. I still think, even though we're talking about, you know, not having those services like day centres or anymore, instead people connected together, that is still the responsibility of the local authority, that people have good communities. I'm possibly the only local authority work in the country, and going back to the early comments about KPIs. So in my appraisal, and one of my KPIs is for everybody in Leeds to have 3 good friends. That's quite a bold thing, but that's not a bad ambition to have, I think. It is a different conversation, and I know you're talking about your conversations. It's also a different conversation, though, between commissioners and providers, about getting them to think very, very differently. The only thing that my finance people like me for, small sparks funding, but don't overfund it. Overfunding kills this. I mean, it's interesting, you were talking about Australia, which has done some of the fantastic work, but you know the Men in Sheds stuff, people, that's quite known now, Men in Sheds, I don't know, you know about Men in Sheds? Yeah. What was interesting, that came from Australia, a ground up thing of connecting people, a bit like our Walk and Whitler. Then the government came across it and thought, oh, that's really great, it's really interesting, we're going to really fund that. Here's your health and safety check, here's your DBS checks, and here's your monitoring report, and it died. And it took quite a bit for it to recover. So, you know, light touch and all of this. And it's a relational activity. This is not something you can simply procure or put into a project plan. It's about relationships, sound like me, relationships with communities, not just individuals. And you let 100 flowers blossom. You know, I never knew that a tiny bit of funding over here was going to end up with an African Mother and Daughters group. But what a fantastic thing to come out of that. And some things will. We're not very good generally in social care letting things die, but they will wilt of their own accord, and they will grow of their own accord as communities take that. And it will reduce demand. So our savings in social care are because people in Leeds go into residential care later, and they increase their hours in home care later. And I don't know if there's any economists around the room. I'll give you just 2 examples, a personal one and a big picture one. So I'll give you one more. I've got time for another story?
Carry on.
Okay. So, one of the stories. So one of the services the other day told me a really lovely story. So it was actually a referral, because they don't tend to work like this, is about just knocking on people's door. But somebody had heard about it. And it was a woman who'd turned up at A&E 8 times in 2 months. Always in an evening, 2 admissions. Last admission was because she'd been found wandering at 2 o'clock in the morning. She was 63, had a slight history of mental health problems, but nothing that, you know, would result in that. Anyway, there was no clear medical problems, and so somebody said, oh, I've heard about this thing, there's this walking group. So through that group, the volunteer went to go see her, and they were talking about some of the options and what she could do and what she could offer. And then they went to go make a cup of tea together, and there in the pantry, this community connector, so remember, not anybody who's a volunteer or registered or anything, found 2 cases of Red Bull. And this 63-year-old was drinking 12 cans of Red Bull a day. And of course, by the evening, she was just bouncing off the walls. And hence, I mean, as I've said, I'm not a health economist. That visit cost that woman who's the volunteer, I think she had a £2.80 bus ticket. 12 visits to A&E, 2 admissions, 35,000, something like that. And if you think about the community connecting, and just the 3rd biggest reason people go into care homes is fear and loneliness, which is a terrible indictment. That's one of the major factors. All you have to do is delay 1 person going into 1 care home for 1 year. You fund 3 of those projects across an entire neighbourhood. That's it, 37 grand, you know. That's the very simple, hard economic stuff, and that's really crucial. But it only works if you get out there. And this falls a bit from what Lynn was saying. When I was first on this journey, I did drive my poor middle manager in social work marketing. I just kept on saying, you've got to go out there. Stop obsessing with eligibility. Stop assessing with assessment. You've got to walk the streets as well. If you Google Mick, know your community. I did it as a blog. Then we did it as a bit of a handout. And what we do now in our social work teams is, I think, largely on a Friday, everybody has to share what they found. And it's just that really simple stuff of parking your car a bit further, going to events, going for a drink after work locally, not necessarily coming into town, having team lunches in the local neighbourhood. All that stuff makes you much more committed to being in that neighbourhood and part of it. That's really critical. And finally, I've got some homework for you. What we're doing now, whenever we're doing a piece of work in Leeds, is asking these questions. At the heart of it, no matter what the piece of work is, what is it doing in terms of community building? And then the difficult questions is, what will be enhanced? What's going to really help that? What might you be restoring? Are you doing a return to neighbourliness? Are you helping those people make those connections? Are you replacing something? And that might be entirely valid, but if you're replacing it, you need to think about what that is. And then the really difficult one, just what might it mutate into? You can't quite control this agenda, but you can have a guess. So my ask of you is probably just to go back through three things. Have a think about having those questions and any sort of strategic work you're doing. Think about where you sit on that deficit asset and be honest and see how you can move along to it. But most important of all, just get out there. Thank you very much. Can't take questions. I've no idea the time anymore. Well, I've got 5 minutes. I will take questions, comments and criticisms.
Such a quiet bunch. What the heck?
Thanks very much. I remember Challenge Anarchy used to have a helicopter, didn't she? That was brilliant, thanks. I thought, I was thinking about, I'm a volunteer of a local Syrian buddy scheme, and so when I was thinking about that as you were talking and the question, and that is that the scheme that I'm part of is great, it's a brilliant thing, but I guess when I was hearing what you were talking about, I felt that maybe the scheme that I'm part of is a little heavy on process, and some of the opportunities for socialising and connection are a bit like maybe a bit prescriptive, and so I thought, does that mean that can you nudge an existing idea or project in a ABCD direction, or is it more about sort of starting fresh and letting the community come with the ideas? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I think you can do both. I mean, ideally, at the heart of ABC, it's the community developing it, but we're not there by a long way. And the map project, much as I loved it, that was a bit, and I had the ability to nudge it